It's always very nice to come and enjoy the beautiful Australian people and nature. And I do quite a bit of research. I'm going to give you this at the very beginning. You can go ahead and access my research on that ResearchGate page. Also, there's a very active Twitter account, Eddie RDMD. There's a YouTube page with many videos. They are eddie-ramirez.com. And if you want to come and travel with me around the world, there is that Instagram page if you want to see what I am seeing. In fact, I wrote this article at the beginning of the pandemic, how hydrotherapy is one of the best preventions and treatments for COVID-19. In fact, we actually did a little clinical trial. We had COVID-positive patients, and then we applied them intensive lifestyle interventions together with hydrotherapy. Not a single one of them had severe COVID and so forth. We'll be talking a little bit more about this throughout the week, but just a little giving you a little information ahead of time. One of the best examples of the power of hydrotherapy regarding COVID was the Finnish people. In Finland, every home has a sauna bath. I go there often. And the sauna bath for the Finnish people is something very cultural. You take a sauna bath in a Finnish family every week, at least, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 times in a week. And interesting statistics in Finland, mortality by COVID-19, 3/4 of the deaths of COVID-19 in Finland were among foreigners living in Finland. See, the foreigner don't have the sauna culture that the native Finnish people have. Maybe instead of locking down everybody, you should have sent saunas to all the homes. We could have a different story here in Australia. And I actually wrote a whole paper, a whole book called Pandemic Busters. So yeah, throughout the week, you'll be able to see this book. This book is not a textbook. Think about this book like an infographic the whole way. There's 22 things you need to be doing to keep your immunity. Unfortunately, this is not the last pandemic we're going to have. We're going to have another pandemic. Yeah, we'll be talking about that this week, so don't miss the lectures. We'll be sharing quite a bit of information this week. And no, it's not going to be coming out from Bill Gates and all these conspiracy things, you know. We actually know where it's coming from because of the behavior that we are doing. It doesn't help with pandemics, prevention, and so forth. And yeah, I also done quite a bit of research on mental health. We'll be talking about this also throughout the week, talking about what are the principles to have good mental health. Again, you can access that research there on that ResearchGate page. All the research is there. In fact, there's also a free guide about the immunity. You can download that for free. Just go there to that ResearchGate page and download that information. Everything here is free. I'm not selling you absolutely anything. Actually, Katie here is going to show you the famous book. That's the actual one.
That's the actual one. Look at this. It's very impressive. Look.
It just landed into Australia.
It did just land into Australia.
Literally.
Where can you get it? Wow.
So she has some, or if she runs out, yeah, you guys contact America, you can get it.
Come to the dinner tomorrow night, and you'll get one.
That's right, for the participants of that. And for the record, I don't make a single penny out of that book. Even though I wrote the book, 100% goes to the organization that I'm involved with, so we can continue our mission and so forth. So let's talk about how to reach healthy, how to be healthy at 100. There's some patients that tell me, Doctor, I don't want to live too long. because, how am I going to move? It's going to be really painful, and, my thinking, may get Alzheimer's disease or something along the lines. I actually don't want to live too long. Well, if your choices of lifestyle are not the best, the bill is going to arrive sooner or later. That's the way it works. But as you make the right lifestyle choices, your ability to have good quality of life improves. And the reality is that all change starts with, this thing may have crashed, I don't know. All change starts with a choice, okay? So our choices have consequences even if we don't like it. So when we are making choices, our choices, even if we don't understand and so forth, the physiology and all these things that happen, they still have consequences. This is just the way that life works. You can actually go back and even though if you don't understand what's happening, you still will see that choices have consequences. And we have different ways of getting information in order to make good, positive choices. And when we have good information, then we can make better decisions. But when the decisions are not the best, that's when things get a little bit complicated. So, the way it works is that all change begins with a decision. And God gave us a frontal lobe in our brain that has the hardware to make a good choice. In fact, every time you take a decision, your frontal lobes are involved in this. And from your whole brain, 33% of your whole brain is frontal lobes. So the frontal lobe of the brain is different among animals. For example, a little cat, only 3.5% of his whole brain is frontal lobe. In your frontal lobe that you also have empathy. That's why the cat doesn't have empathy. Have you seen how he tortures his victim? No empathy whatsoever, okay? Because of the size of his frontal lobe. While, let me ask you this, who could do more tricks, a dog or a cat? A dog, because the dog, 7% of his brain is frontal lobe. And that's why he's able to do a little bit more complex thing. Even his personality, isn't it? Is much more rich than the personality of a cat. Now, who can do even more tricks? A dog or a monkey? The monkey, because the monkey, 17% of the whole brain of the monkey is frontal lobe. Now, there's some people there telling you things that are not true. We did not come from monkeys, I can assure you of that. How do I know that? Because the brain of the human and the brain of the monkey are very different. See, 33% of the whole brain of the human being is frontal lobe. That's why we're able to do many things that the monkey cannot do. For example, a monkey cannot speak. You need a lot of brain power to be able to speak. The monkey doesn't have that. In fact, that's something that we actually have hardwired inside of us. As we are born, we are wired to speak. Okay? And in fact, the whole skull of the human compared to the skull of the monkey are very different. In fact, I like to do this observation. Next time you go to the Natural History Museum, so that they don't trick you, I'm going to give you the tip. When they have the skulls, supposedly how humans evolve and so forth, I can tell you, there's only two groups of skulls there. Either you have the skulls of humans, or you have the skulls of monkeys. There's nothing that is bridging them. They're too different one to another. Go and visit the museum with this information. You'll see what I'm telling you about. The way that the face is, the face of the human is flat. The face of the monkey is with an angle. Where the brain goes, the brain of the human is nice and big. The brain of the monkey is small. Look at their teeth. The teeth of the monkey is rough with big, a very type of teeth that is able to tear down things and so forth. The teeth of the human is nice and refined. The jaw, the monkey needs a lot of strength in his jaw to bite and tear things down and so forth. Not we as humans, as we just chew our food. So when you check the musculature, it's very different. And that's why the jaw of the monkey is big and prominent, because you need all that in order to eat and so forth, while the human being, the jaw is nice and refined. Anyhow, I'll give you that for homework next time you go to the Natural History Museum. So the will is the governing power in the nature of men. What we choose have consequences. So how are we going to make better choices? Well, we have three potential counselors that can help us make better choices. What are those three counselors? You have the judgment. So what the judgment does, you take all the factors into consideration, and then as you evaluate things, then you say, you know what, the best thing is going to be this one. So in that way, you're able to make a better choice. And judgment has to do with the question, is this the best decision for me? I notice that some people get in trouble because they ask the wrong question. When they are in front of a food item and so forth, they ask the question, what's wrong with this? Well, that's the wrong question. Don't ask that question. Rather, ask the question, is this the best for me? I want the best for me. Why settle for second or third, isn't it? So when you go and make your health decisions, choose the best, not the second or the third best. And in that way, you should be able to make a better choice. Second counselor that we have is the counselor of reason. And reason takes into account all the factors, but you need to put good information in order to make good choices. If the websites on the internet where you're getting your health information is questionable information, your thinking changes, and you may think that you are doing the best choices, but those choices that you're taking may not necessarily be the best. So be careful. We even have a term in computer science called GIGO, which means garbage in, garbage out. In other words, you put garbage here, Garbage is going to be the choice, okay? Be careful what you are putting it. And for the record, not because it's on the internet, that means that it's truth, okay? There's a lot of conspiracies and all kinds of strange ideas there that not because it's there, it means that it is true. Be careful. Third one, your conscience. That's our third counselor. So conscience has to do with the morality of the decision. And if you are a Christian, you're going to be asking the question, is this something that is going to glorify God? If I choose that, am I glorifying God by taking that choice? And you know, from the very beginning, humans had that will. God didn't make robots. God made humans with the ability to decide. Because see, if you made a robot, do you think that that's going to be something loving and so forth? No, isn't it? In order to have true love, you have to have the ability to choose. And since God made human beings in the image of God, human beings were a reflection of that love, that loving God that made us. And love can never be forced. I didn't go to my wife and twisted her arm and said, "You have to marry me." You know, you think that would have worked very well? No, isn't it? It had to be a decision of her heart, isn't it? That is where true love lies. Anytime you take the possibility to choose, you take away the possibility of loving. And that's why God made human beings free beings, able to choose and so forth. And if there is no love, sadly, there is no happiness. So we have that ability to copy from the Creator. As a loving Creator, He had to make His beings with the ability to choose in order for them to be true loving creatures. But God could have made robots, isn't it, that would do everything perfect and so forth. But see, that love would not have come from those hearts. And when God made human beings, He put them on a perfect environment. But they still had the ability to make choices. And they had to make a choice. And Eve had in front of her an important decision, but since Eve was not a robot, could choose to disobey God if she chose to. And sadly, we read in the scriptures that her choice was to go against the will of God. And sadly, that decision had consequences. So from that beautiful environment in which we were, it was exchanged, and we went away from that original plan. So the tree of life still is quite present today, and it represents everything that is good, everything that is positive, anything that is life-giving in front of us. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil represents all those poor choices with their negative, unhealthy, life-destroying practices. So if you thought this was only something that Eve faced, we are facing that. What are your choices? What are you choosing? Are you choosing things that will give you a better quality of life, or are you choosing those things that are literally destroying your life? And it's not that God was holding something and said, oh, I don't want him to have this. No, there's a reason why he said, don't choose this because there's bad consequences here. That's why I don't want you to choose that. And sadly, anything that separates us from God is not good. Okay? In fact, that is something, a characteristic of sin. Sin separates us from God. And you know that very well. If your mom cooks some, yummy type of cookies and puts them in a jar and puts that jar in the kitchen, and she tells the little kid, I need to go out. I'm going to leave the cookies here. Please don't eat those cookies. As she goes out, the kid is tempted and then opens the jar of those cookies, and as he is putting his hand to grab one of those cookies, he hears that the door is being opened and her mother is on her way. Question: where does that kid think his mom should be? Maybe in Russia, somewhere there, isn't it? As far as possible, isn't it? See, when we are making the wrong type of choices, we want God to be as far as possible, because sin creates separation between us and Him. And the reality is that as we separate from God, the wages of sin are dead. And this is not only talking about the spiritual realm, but they also have consequences at the level of the physical realm. And is a law of this world. Bad decisions will have bad consequences. That's why we need to be careful with our choices and always choose what is the best. His law is written with His own finger upon every nerve, every muscle, every faculty. And this is the way that we were created. We were created in order to naturally take the best choices. As things change in this world, now the ability to choose wrong became easier and easier and easier. But the will of God is for us to have good health and good life and have it more abundantly. And that is the opposite of living a selfish, I-type center of lifestyle. That type of way of living in which I'm only the what it matters and nobody else matters, actually doesn't lead you to happiness. When you take others and you have the heart of service, that's when happiness comes above. And there's a very interesting verse in Deuteronomy 4:40. It says that God is asking us to follow those guidelines that He gave us through His statutes, His commandments. And why is He asking us those things? That it may go well with whom? It says there. With whom? With you, and with who else? With your children after you, and that you may what? Prolong your days in the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time. So notice here, what is the will of God? The will of God is that it may go well for us. That is what God wants from us. God wants the best from each one of us. Just as a parent wants the best for their children, God also wants the best for every single one of us. And what else is the will of God? That we may prolong our days. God wants us to have nice, long, healthy, happy-filled lives. That is the will of God. That is what God desires from each one of us. But you know, choices have consequences. Let me share with you this interesting statistic so you can see how choices are having consequences. This is a map of America, as you're very well aware. And there is a public health organization in America called the CDC. And the CDC, back in 1985, was very worried that there were having many cases of obesity in America. So what they decided, they started this project in order to understand where obesity was happening in America. And if you notice, those states with the blue, dark blue color, those had between 10 to 14% of all the people living in those states had obesity. Notice what happened with time. This is back in 1985. You have 1986, 1987, 88, 89, 90, 91. They had to put a new classification. Now the blue became even darker. Those states with that dark blue, between 15 to 19% of the people in those states have a problem with obesity. 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, they had to put a new classification. Now, the states in the yellow color, about 20%, in other words, 1 out of 5 people in those states have a problem with obesity. 98, 99, 2000, 2001, a new classification. Now, the states with the red color, 1 out of 4 people in those states have a problem with obesity. 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, a new classification. Now, the dark red color, 30% of the people in those states have a problem with obesity. 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and then they changed the way they measure things, so you cannot, compare the 2010 with the rest that they continue. But this is just for illustration purposes. Are things getting better? Not necessarily, isn't it? And sadly, this is not just a phenomena of America. This lifestyle is being exported. In fact, I just saw it on the way to the airport. Kentucky Fried Chicken and Burger King. Well, here's Happy Jack, let's call it like that or something like that. And so forth. Is being exported all over the world. And we are having a worldwide crisis. I've been to 88 countries on this planet. And I can tell you, this is not an American problem. This is a worldwide problem. So you have this mass media with these messages that are not the best for our choices, trying to convince you, eat this or that, and not necessarily the best things for you. And that's why God's will is for you to have good life and have it abundantly. Therefore, that's why those counselors that we were talking about, remember, we need to ask that question, what is the best? And sadly, the problem is that it's not just obesity. The problem is that as obesity increases, many other diseases increase together. such as diabetes, such as cancer, and so forth, that they're quite linked to body weight. So it's not only one issue, but we're opening the door to multiple other health problems by the choices that we may be making. This is a good example of good, healthy, abundant life. These are good friends of mine. They are two brothers that they never got married, and they were happy to live life together like that. They work together, they build houses. They are originally from Canada, and it comes to show you, as you're making choices, as you age, what type of quality of life do you want to have? And they are an excellent example, as they have made choices throughout their life. Today they have nice quality of life. We went to visit them up in Canada, to Lethbridge, Canada, and they took us to this beautiful national park in Canada. You know, there's some beautiful national parks there. This is a national park in Canada. If you go in America, it's a national park that is together America and Canada. It's one national park. So in America is the Glacier Park, and then you have the Canadian side of things. And I took this picture. You know, that's how beautiful this is. You know, anywhere you take pictures there is just absolutely gorgeous. So it was in the winter, and they took us for this nice. It was like 10 kilometers. Okay. They're 72 years old, one of them. And yeah, you know, they had a good pace and everything. This is a frozen lake that we were walking together with my daughters. So that is a good choice type of, you can see what happened as you take that long term. And doing exercise is good for you. Look at this brain activity scan image. If you are just quiet, you know, notice how the activity of the brain starts to decrease, especially if you're sitting down. And just 20 minutes of a brisk walk, notice the effect that it's having at the level of the brain. That's why it's not a good idea to be sitting down the whole time. You need to be getting up and start to become physically active. It's good for you. But at the same time, there are things that have a negative consequence. By the way, you can get this. This is a video. You can get it on my YouTube page, the one I told you, dr.ramirez.com, if you want to see the clip on your own eyes. This one is a little clip from ABC News, one of the main television stations in America. And it talks about this reporter. This reporter submitted herself to this scan that is called a functional MRI. It measures, you know, how the activity of the brain. And then after she did the scan, she took 1 cup of coffee, and then she repeated the scan. Notice what happened to her brain. This is the brain before the caffeine. Notice nice redness all over the brain. That means good blood flow. After taking 1 cup of coffee, blood flow to the brain decreased by 38%. Okay? You think that's good? It is not good. Your brain needs a lot of oxygen. So 1 simple dose of caffeine will cause this at the level of your brain. In other words, your thinking ability, your ability to make those choices is being impaired due to the decreased blood flow to the brain. In fact, in lifestyle medicine, we know that anything that is addictive is not good for you. If you take coffee every day and you stop coffee, what's going to happen? Man, you're going to start getting nervous, you have the headache, and so forth. I'm yet to find somebody addicted to broccoli, for example. Okay? Because broccoli is not addictive. If you eat broccoli every day and then you stop eating broccoli for 2-3 days, you're not going to have a bad night's sleep, and you're not going to get nervous and so forth. Okay. Yeah, what about the caffeinated coffee? It's better than the real coffee, but still there's some caffeine there left. Plus, there's chemicals that are used to remove the caffeine, which actually have been documented to increase your risk of bladder cancer. So, yeah, the choice is yours. Rather take the Roma or one of those, coffee cereals and so forth. So, as you can see, the commandments of God are not arbitrary. The commandments of God are life-giving. When we do what God wants us to do, there are blessings as a result of that. And John 10:10 talks about that the thief does not come to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that you may have what? Life, and that you may have it how? More abundantly. Not only in this life, in this earth, but in the life to come. That is the will of God. God came to give us life more abundantly. In fact, if you read the Greek word, you can translate that into super abundantly. And our choices have eternal consequences. So when we are making our choices, let's take that into consideration. My choices are not only going to have an impact here, but on the life to come. So we need to be careful on what type of choices we are taking. And Genesis 3:6 tells us the story how when Eve took that fruit and ate it, not only she got affected, then she shared that with her husband, and then the husband ate it, and he also got affected secondary to that. So when she ate that fruit, she opened a door that God wanted them to keep closed. And as that door was open, sadly, sickness, pain, death, fighting, and separation from God happened as a result of that bad choice. And they were affected spiritually as they got separated from the source of life and health. They got affected physically as they started having sickness and pain. And they got affected mentally and emotionally as now anxiety and nervousness and all kinds of problems started becoming the norm among humans. And God created us to live in that garden, but sadly, as time has gone by, we are going farther and farther from the lifestyle of that garden. The food we do, the exercise we do, the activities we do, the relationships we do, and so forth. So that's why I'm very happy that you're here today, because you're able to learn about those laws that were given back then, that we can learn from them so that we can continue adjusting our choices so that we can try to go back to the lifestyle of that garden. And you can see how, as society starts making the wrong types of choices, you can see how the causes of death have changed as a result of the way that society is taking choices. Things that were very rare, such as cancer, sadly something common. Things like heart disease, stroke, things that were very, very rare in the old days, sadly, number one cause of death here in Australia. So the decisions go beyond the genetic and the environment. They have an impact on our health and our longevity. And Isaiah 53 says, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So God says that we in our choices have gone astray. And it's interesting that in the Bible, it gives us example of people that made bad choices so that we can learn from that and try to avoid the pothole that some of them fell on. For example, if you read the book of Genesis, you can see what are the results of uncontrolled anger. The first death happened because the person was not able to control its own emotions. Or in the book of Psalms, how uncontrolled sexual passion end up in an adultery, and that end up breaking down families, causing pain, and not only causing pain right there, but that bad choice started to affect many other people along the way in a domino type of effect. Or you have the example of Judas. What happens with unchecked greed and how you're able to trade the life of Jesus for a few pieces of silver secondary to unchecked greed. So as you can see, bad choices not only have bad consequences, but those bad consequences end up affecting others, and that domino effect continues. But at the same time, the Bible also teaches us about good choices and what were the results of those good choices. For example, Joseph, even though he came from a very pathological type of family setting, still how God was able to help him overcome those developmental issues, and how when Joseph took the right choices, how he was able to avoid some of the problems that others fell. They were able to avoid it, and there were good consequences as a result of that. Or you have Daniel, how he, on his heart, made a choice. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. And as a result, God blessed Daniel, making him 10 times, better physically, mentally, and spiritually when he put God in the first place. So as you can see, all change starts with good decisions. And some people may say, but doctor, what about genetics? I have bad family genes. My dad had this disease. My mom had this other one. Well, genetic plays about 20%, 15%, depending who you are reading. Think about the gun that has the bullet that is loaded, yet the way you live is what's going to actually pull the trigger and shoot the bullet. So not because the bullet is in the gun, that doesn't mean the bullet needs to go out. That's why we need to make sure that we are making the right choices. And in a landmark paper that came out back in 2006, was reported on New York Times, it was very well and very clearly shown that what are we inheriting in our genes may not necessarily determine the quality of life that we're going to have in the future. In San Francisco, there was a very interesting study that was designed, and in the county of Alameda, they explored the whole county, all the inhabitants of that county in America, and they were trying to understand what types of behaviors have life-destroying effect and what type of behaviors have life-giving years. So after doing a big survey among all that population, following up those people year after year, these were their conclusions. It was determined that no smoking was beneficial to longevity, as many of us know that. Also, sleeping 7 to 8 hours of sleep, having adequate body weight, also having regular exercise as something that is part of you, and finally, avoiding alcohol. So those choices, that study from Dr. Belloc, it was a nice big study, 6,928 participants, and they discovered there were two other factors. The second time that they published the paper, they recrunched the numbers, and two other factors were found. It was avoiding snacking, okay, that was determined to be a behavior that is life-giving, and also having regular breakfast, not skipping breakfast. So those are 7 factors that were found to increase longevity. And the way they work, these factors, they work synergetically. The more you put them of these 7 factors in your life, the better the results. But sadly, they also work synergetically the other way. So the least of these factors that you have, the least years that you will be expected to live. So what they did, they made this chart, and in this chart, you can see the effect that the habits have, okay? So, for example, somebody that is 60 years old, okay, if they are doing from 0 to 2 of those factors that we just talked about, there were 7 if you remember, in reality, that person is not 60, that person is actually 84 years old, okay? Can you see the negative effect that this has, okay? While somebody that is 20 years old and has the 9 habits, in reality, they're not 20 years, they're around 11 years, okay? Can you see the good and bad here? Can you see how choices have consequences? And if you notice by the numbers, the older that you are, the bigger the effect that it has. And also, the negative side actually has a bigger effect than the positive side. Can you see that? Okay. So one of the multiple motivations, isn't it, to try to put things in perspective and see, you know, do I want to be really 80-something years old if I'm 50, you know, and so forth. So those 7 factors, again, because people always ask, Doctor, what were those 7 factors? Okay, no smoking, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, adequate weight, regular exercise, no or reduced alcohol, nothing between meals, and regular breakfast. So now you can see something you need to write on your refrigerator, isn't it? You're going to be ticking them, you know, if you have them or not. So choices do have consequences. And in closing, National Geographic was identifying the longest living people on planet Earth. And they were surprised to see that there was a group of people in America called the Seventh-day Adventists that were living 10 years above the average of the American inhabitant. So the choices that they were making had given them a longevity edge to those Seventh-day Adventists. And that Buettner, which happens to be not an Adventist at all, he actually documented that through that article in National Geographic. He went further to do documentaries and even wrote this book called The Blue Zones, in which he identifies those longevity spots. Among them, you have Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. So those places are the places that you have the highest amount of centenarians. And not only highest amount of centenarians, but those centenarians have good quality of life. You don't see them just sitting down there in front of television the whole day. No, they're biking and they're swimming and they're gardening and they're doing all kinds of things and have good quality of life. And among the factors that Dan Buettner documented is very interesting that they are similar to some of the other factors of the 7 studies that I showed you a minute ago, but also he adds the relationship side of things. He found out that those centenarians happen to have good, strong family ties. You know, in Italy, for example, in Sardinia, people meet at least once a week as a family, and they laugh and spend some good time together as they are enjoying life together. They don't smoke, those centenarians. They follow a plant-based diet. They are constantly moving throughout the day. They have many friends and social connections. And another factor that Dan Buettner identified was the faith factor. Every single one of those centenarians was people of faith. For them, faith was something that drove them and gave them strength and helped them through the difficult situations that happened throughout life. They were able to grab from the hand of faith to continue forward. So this Seventh-day Adventist in Loma Linda, as I told you, these people are the ones that are living 10 years or more in comparison to the rest of the average Americans. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you see Loma Linda in a map, you have Los Angeles, which is a very polluted city. Anytime you land there on the plane, you cross to this thick pollution layer. You can see it, literally as you land into Los Angeles. And the winds from the ocean, because Los Angeles is next to the ocean, push all that pollution to a chain of mountains that are next to Loma Linda. So I don't know if you know this, but Loma Linda, California is one of the most polluted places in America. So you have the most polluted place in America, yet you have the longest living people, which tells you there must be doing something right, yes or no? And by the way, I actually had the privilege of having as my patient one of the researchers that was studying pollution in America, So he was confirming that what I'm telling you, that this was a tremendously polluted place. So, what are they doing, these people there? Well, if you study their lifestyle, you will see that there is a dietetic pattern. They're eating a certain way that is giving them that longevity. They're avoiding things like smoking and alcohol, and they have this wholesome lifestyle that is able to be applicable all over the world. If you go to Loma Linda, California, to the churches there, it's not that they're all Caucasian or they're all Asian. No, it's a combination. You find people from all over the world. So it is not a genetic factor, but rather has to do with the choices that you take. So in closing, we need to take this into consideration and ask that question in your head. If what I am choosing, is it the best for me? Make sure that you are putting good information in your head so that you can take better choices. That's why you're going to be coming every week, I imagine, this week. So we're going to be having this seminar, isn't it? So that we can be putting good information in our heads. And finally, ask that question. Is what I am choosing glorifying God, yes or not? So may God bless you. May you continue to choose, and now that you are aware, take these factors into consideration and make our choices be blessed by God so that we can choose the best for our bodies. Thank you very much.